Good morning, everybody, from Jeff's Little Engine Service. So I've been putting off these for quite a while here. They were all donated to the shop over the past year or two, but I think it's time to get them going. Since we're getting close to spring here, it's time to start getting these up and running so I can sell them. Two of them, these two have the Kawasaki engine, and this one has the Briggs and Stratton engine on it. Looks like we have a model. We have a model 14PZ, we have a model 14SB, and we have a model 14PB. Let's start with this one. So the mower looks like it's in pretty good shape overall. One of the first things I always do is just to check to see if it has oil in it. And it does, so that's a really good sign. I'm sure the engine is good. Give it a little pull here. Yep. Oh, got some mouse stuff flying out of there. See that? Looks like we got a mouse house in here. You can see as I'm pulling it, this mouse's fluff blowing out here. Hopefully he didn't chew any wires. So we have compression and we have oil. Let's see what we have in the fuel tank here. Perfect. It's empty. That's what I want to see. Fuel valve there. Okay, so typical thing when something's been sitting like this, the first thing, my chickens want out. First thing we want to address is the fuel system and the carburetor. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get into this carburetor. So you have two bolts on each side. This is my 10mm socket. Don't forget to take off the fuel line. You should probably do that first while the carburetor is still mounted up. Give it a little twist. There you go. So once you get these two out, you should be able to take off this plastic piece. Okay. And this is just a little rubber boot, and you also have your breather hose attached here. You can just disconnect that. Now I've found, so now we're basically just held on by the linkages. I've found the best way to get them off the linkages is to loosen up this bracket. You take this one out, and then over here just loosen it up quite a bit, and that loosens up this bracket here, which gives you enough play to rotate the carburetor and get it off the linkage. Looks like if you bend the carburetor enough this way, you can take off your throttle linkage, and you also have a spring on there. And now, let's see, which way do you rotate this? It looks one of these ways. Oh, I see. You rotate it this way, then it comes off. Now we're free. So here's our carburetor. go ahead and take off the float bowl first, see what we have. Looking in here usually gives you a good indication how the rest of the carburetor looks. If you give it a good tap, be careful, not too hard. It'll come right off. Yeah, luckily this carburetor, I mean, it's dirty, but it's not in too bad of shape. It can be rebuildable easily. And you'll want to clean out all that stuff in the float bowl. You also have a rubber gasket O-ring that goes between the float bowl and the carburetor, so don't lose that. So to get out the hinge pin, you got to be very careful because these tabs are easy to break. Sometimes if you can get a hold of it a little bit and just twist it, you can work it loose. Sometimes you can tap it loose. These pliers grip much better. There we go. And this is your float and your float needle valve. That's a very important part of the carburetor. You can see it has a little rubber tip. It's always a good idea to replace those, although you don't always need to. But if you find that your carburetor is flooding, or during when your engine's warm, if it's having trouble starting up, sometimes that can indicate a bad float needle. If you're getting gas into your oil, that could mean that your float needle's bad, allowing your carburetor to flood, yada yada yada. So let's start cleaning this stuff up, shall we? Let that sit for a while. So now that we have the carburetor cleaned off, we can see what's going on a little bit. I've had this tip soaking in a little bit of carburetor cleaner here, just to get to make sure these parts come out easily. So let me show you the parts that need to be addressed. Show you the parts that get plugged up inside these carburetors. First, let's take out the slow jet here. Sometimes you have to take off the idle screw to get it out. So you can see, this is what it looks like. You have these holes on each side, and you also have a hole down on the end, and you can clearly see that this hole is plugged up. That is definitely one of the reasons why this carburetor won't run. So I have a variety of cleaning tools here. One of the most effective one is just this wire, which you can poke down in and get these holes free. They're pretty small. Sometimes you have to even go with a smaller wire. I'm just going to soak that in there for a little while until we can poke it free. On this particular model, as you get into the main jet area, you see this little tiny jet here needs to be taken out. These things are so easy to break, you got to be very careful taking them out. And if they resist at all, it's a good idea to heat it up. It's just a little tiny brass jet and can break very easily. See, that's what it looks like. And there's also supposed to be a hole down through there. Gonna put him down in the cleaner too. Now that we have this one out, we're able to pull out the one that's in here. And once again, be very careful. If it doesn't come loose, you got to heat that sucker up. Put a little bit of carburetor cleaner in there. Do whatever you need to do to get it to come out easy. Yeah, see, that helped out a lot, just spraying a little bit of carburetor cleaner down in there. There it is. Okay, so sometimes your main jet is separate from the nozzle that goes all the way up through here, but it looks like on this model it's all one piece, and look at how nasty that is. There's a lot of tiny holes in this component here, as well as a hole that's supposed to go through the middle. All that needs to be cleaned up. So this is another reason why this carburetor wasn't running. So let's clean out down in the hole. Q-tip up in there. Q-tip down in that one as well. We just want to overall clean up this whole carburetor before we think about putting it back together. Yeah, I don't know if you can see down in there, folks, but it's clean. Get off all this crusty stuff. Carburetor looks pretty clean overall. That's good. So let's soak these components for a while so we can get them clean. You can see these tiny little holes. I want to make sure that they're all poked out and clean. I also ran a pipe cleaner up the whole dang thing to make sure it was cleaned out. So I believe this piece is ready to go back in. It could be a little cleaner though. So we can go back in. Now don't tighten this down too tight. You can break things. I say this in every video.
Do not over tighten.
But tighten it enough. Alright. Okay, let's see how this little guy is doing. That's actually your main jet for this carburetor. So clean them out good. Oh yeah, it's plugged for sure. I mean, make sure to get it as clean as you possibly can. You can see how tiny that hole is, so something the size of a speck of salt can stop your engine from running if your main jet gets plugged up. Can be tricky getting this guy back in. Oh, see those threads? See those threads? How there's still some powder in there? I want to make sure to clean that out. We need it spotless, folks.
Spotless.
Now we can put this little teeny tiny bugger in there. Guess what I'm going to say now? That's right. Do not over tighten. Very easy to break. Very easy. Ah, there we go. All right. Now we got to work on this pilot jet here, which was really plugged up. There we go. And before you put them back in, definitely look down in there and make sure that that's all cleared out. So this screw here is your fuel mixture adjustment screw. I usually don't mess with it because rarely does it get plugged up, but sometimes they do. And if they do, I don't know if you can see, down in the carburetor there's actually 2 or 3 holes usually. If you do think it's plugged up, you can take it out, and I believe the preliminary setting is 1.5. So after you clean it out, you screw it all the way in, then back it out 1.5. But I'm just going to go ahead and poke through those holes down in here. They're on the side. They're not plugged up, but I always like to do that just to make sure. Can you see them down in there? For now, I'm going to reuse this needle. You remember there was no gas in the oil. It wasn't overflowing, so that tells me that it was still functioning fine. But they're easy enough to replace. You can actually replace it while the carburetor is on the vehicle. It takes about 5 minutes. So if we have problems, I'll replace it. But for now, just for testing purposes, we're going to reuse it. It's also a good idea to clean up into your inlet spout here. You can get some stuff that accumulates in there. Put the float and the float valve back into place. It looks like this hinge pin only comes out one way. It's kind of flattened on that side, so pay attention to that. I didn't pay attention to that. I'm glad I didn't try to pull it out that side. There we go. Just confirm that your float needle is still in place. Float bowl is nice and clean. That's a 12mm tool I have here. Alright, we're ready to go back on. And you can see these gaskets are still usable, in my opinion, so we're going to go ahead and reuse these gaskets. But if you want to replace them, go right ahead. This here is just a either a vent tube or an overflow tube for the carburetor. You'll want to make sure that the throttle plate and the choke plate rotate easily. Sometimes these can get gummed up. Basically, if you just put carburetor cleaner in there and work them loose, they'll work loose if they're stuck. You can see a hole way down in there I didn't clean, so I'm going to go ahead and spray some cleaner down in there. I'm going to clean this thing up a little bit, try to make it look nice, maybe even hose it down before I put the carburetor back on. One thing I noticed here, this is the air filter. See how it just falls apart? This needs to be replaced. Actually, I might just blow off all that foam and just use this because I think that's still good. My cheap ass, I'll just replace it. Well, that sucks. I just noticed that this piece was damaged. I don't think I did that. Looks like it's been like that for a while. I just didn't notice it. I wonder if I can repair that. Well, before I clean this up, let's let the chickens out. Well, here's the piece that's broken. I've decided to kind of rough it up on the outside, and I'm going to use some plastic epoxy, glue it together, and then smear some of the epoxy on the outside here. And I think that's going to hold it. By roughing up the outside, that'll give the epoxy something to stick to. Because I'm also going to put the epoxy in the crack here. So it's time to try and fix this thing. It's pretty cold out here, so I've been warming it up in front of this heater here. I've also been warming up the epoxy. It's a two-part plastic epoxy. My plan is just to get it into all the cracks and smush it shut and then zip tie it together. So let's get started. Equal parts of each type of epoxy. That should be plenty. This stuff really stinks, man. I don't think you're supposed to use metal to stir this stuff up, so I'm just using a zip tie here. So you'll want to mix it up for a while. Make sure all of it's good and mixed. Whew, this stuff really does stink, man. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So I'm just going to start on the crack line here. There's even a little crack over on that side. Getting it down in there. I think I have it good and gooped up where I want it. Well, now's the tricky part, trying to get this thing to stay together like that. I think I'm just going to try and zip tie it together first, see if that works. So it didn't quite hold it in the position I was hoping. So I'm going to try and hold it here for a few minutes and see if I can get it to set up. Hold it in front of the heater. I got this guy hassling me while I'm trying to do this. Hey man, it's my garage. Beat it. I think this clamp might help hold it in place. Yeah. It seems to be holding it in place, so I'm going to call that good. I think I'll make some more epoxy and rub it around these cracks on the outside here just to reinforce it. there you go. All gooped up. I'm gonna let it dry for a while. So before I gas this baby up, one thing I want to make sure to do is, see down in there, I don't know if you can see it, but there's still some water down in there. So we want to make sure this gas tank is completely cleaned out before we fill it up. So I'm just going to put a little rag down in here. Definitely don't want any water in the tank. Blow things around a bit. If I cover up the tank and blow air into here, you'll probably have some stuff shoot out the fuel line. Oh, you do have to turn. So you'll want to turn your gas nozzle on, and you can see that's the fuel line. I'm going to blow some air down into the tank. Yeah, there was definitely some stuff in there. Oops. Can't seem to get a hold of that sucker. So there wasn't a lot of water in there. I always clean out the gas cap too. Well, here's how it turned out. All dry. Feels pretty sturdy. Is that better? It's nice and purty now. Okay, so we have this little spigot that we hook up to here. I think I'll do that last. Just want to make sure we get that up like that. Just be careful when you're tightening this up that nothing gets bound up. The bolts should go in nice and smooth. Just again, make sure nothing's bound up before you start cinching things down. You'll want to go back and forth when you're cinching it. You want to get it pretty tight. Not tight enough to break anything, but tight enough so it works. Oops. Should be enough. Still have the fuel valve turned off. I'm going to turn it on. Now we get to watch for leaks. You watching? You see anything leaking yet? You guys watch that for a while and let me know. You guys see anything? Okay. Let's see if we can start it up. So some of you might think, because of that surging sound, that the carburetor isn't working properly. However, if you listened when I engaged the blades, because this model has one of these blade clutches, you can see the engine smoothed out, and it showed you that the carburetor was in fact running properly. Even when I was revving it up, when the blade was engaged, it was running smoothly. And even when I was idling down with the blade engaged, it was running smoothly. But as soon as I disengaged the blade, we started getting that surging again. That's not from the carburetor like you would expect. It's because of that blade clutch on there. The bearing may need to be lubed up, maybe getting a little bit sticky, but that's what causes that engine to surge like that. You'll experience the same situation on pressure washers sometimes, where if you don't have the wand engaged, the engine surges up and down, up and down, up and down. That's because the water pump is putting a little bit of pressure on the shaft there. So that's your lesson for the day, folks. It definitely was having some problems with the throttle. I think it's just really rusted up in here. I probably need to make some adjustments to make sure the choke is engaging properly, because it didn't seem to be going on either.